ISS. I don't know if for sure most of you know what is the ISS, and Tarifa is going to explicitly talk about it. So please, Tarifa, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Elias, for presenting me. So as Dr. Elias said, my name is Tarifa Al-Kabi. I work as a research engineer in the KeySat laboratory here at SAASST, and my talk will be about how to communicate with the ISS.
Your audio is a little bit bad. I don't know why.
Like this?
It's too loud. Maybe. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
We have some echoes. Are you using headphones?
Yes, I'm using my headphones.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go over an introduction to the ISS, the communication systems on the ISS, and lastly, how we can contact the ISS as radio amateurs. So the ISS, or the International Space Station, is considered to be the largest single structure humans ever put into space, and a unique science laboratory that does science experiments in microgravity. It's a partnership among several countries like the United States, Russia, Canada, Japan, and the participating nations of the European Space Agency. The main construction was completed between 1998 and 2011, but even after, the station was continuously being evolved and it included new missions and experiments. And since November of the year 2000, it has been continuously occupied, generally holding crew between 3 and 6 people, sometimes even more. Sometimes one time it held 13 crew members, but usually that happens when there are visiting astronauts or they are between changing shifts. So when it comes to the orbit of the ISS, it flies at an average altitude of 400 kilometers above Earth. And to keep this altitude, it is equipped with thrusters that work with propellants, and it needs to be reposted around 1 time every month. And this orbit gives it around, with this orbit, it circles the globe every 90 minutes and makes 16 orbits a day around Earth at the speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. And if we measure the distance that it takes, it travels in 1 day, it is the equivalent of going from the Earth to the Moon and back. So on the ISS, the astronauts have a busy schedule. They usually spend their time doing experiments and maintenance. They have 2 hours every day allocated for exercise and personal care. And exercise is important in space to mitigate the loss of bone and muscle mass, especially in microgravity. And they also perform spacewalks like the astronaut we see here, and it's usually done for repairs, for testing new technology, or for science experiments. They also conduct media events, and they post updates to social media. As to the structure of the ISS was taken into space piece by piece, and it was gradually built in orbit using spacewalking astronauts and robotics. It includes modules and connecting nodes that contain living quarters and laboratories. And we also have the exterior trusses for support. We have the solar panels for energy and radiators that get rid of extra heat that builds up on the station. So between 1998 and 2011, the first module ever sent was the functional cargo block, otherwise known as the Zarya Russian module. Next was the Node 1, the Unity module, and we have other modules like the Japanese experimental module known as Kibo, and it is the largest module in the ISS. We have the Kabula, which consists of seven windows with covers that can be opened and closed and give the astronauts a chance to look at the view outside the ISS, and it is an important module since there aren't many windows on the ISS. If you heard of the Canada Arm 2, a robotic arm, it is part of the Mobile Servicing System, MMS. And the last module was sent actually in 2016, and it is the Big Law Expandable Activity Module, BEAM. And it was an experimental module to experiment with the technology of an expandable module in space. So overall, it took around 42 separate launches to take every piece to space. And the overall weight of the ISS is around 420,000 kilograms or equivalent to 420 tons. Coming now to the communication systems on the ISS. As we know, a good communication system is an essential part of any spacecraft, crewed or uncrewed. And for the ISS, it is considered to be the link between the spacecraft, the crew, and the flight controllers on the ground. And without a good communication system, the crew will not have a good idea about the condition of the ISS, and the ground will not be able to help them in case of any emergency. So the information on the ISS needs to be moved, first of all, between the modules themselves, between the spacecraft and any visiting vehicle, because sometimes we have visiting vehicles bringing in astronauts or resupplying the station. And lastly, between the spacecraft and the control centers on the ground. And for that, it uses different systems in different bands depending on every specific need, and we will look at some of the systems after. But the type of ISS information that needs to be moved include commands and configuration data. There's the static data of the ISS systems themselves, and we also need to move the health and safety and region information of the visiting vehicles. We need to transmit experiment data to the ground. Two-way voice and video is very important in ISS. And lastly, alarm tones in case of any emergency. So as I said before, the ISS orbit is at 400 kilometers. It makes 16 orbits per day. And if we rely on direct link between the ISS and the ground control and the mission control centers, then we will not have continuous communication with the control centers. So actually, the main communication path relies on the NASA tracking and data relay satellite, the TDRS system, which consists of a number of satellites in geosynchronous orbit about the Earth. And when we say geosynchronous, we mean a high orbit that matches with the rotation of Earth. Sorry about that. So the TDRS system is a number of satellites that provide continuous communication with the mission control. And it's a relay link for the S and KU paths between the ground station and the space station. Right now they have around 10 satellites in this system, and they are distributed around the Earth. So together they provide continuous coverage and link between the ISS and the mission control centers. And if you see in the graph here, the way that the system works is that information from the ISS moves to one of the nearby TDRS satellites, and from there it moves to the ground, and vice versa in case of we needed to send information from the ground to the ISS. So moving now to the communication systems in the ISS, first we have the Sband. The Sband is used to send commands and from the control centers around the world to the ISS. It is used for sending telemetry from the ISS to the ground And it provides two-way voice communication with the ISS crew and the control centers around the world. And because these are all very important tasks, it was designated with the highest level of criticality. If you see here, the Sband communication system on the S1 truss, and there's another one on the P1 truss, and only one of them is used at a given time. The next communication system used in the ISS is the Kuband, which is officially known as the space-to-ground subsystem. You can see here two antennas on the Z1 truss, one as a backup antenna. This system is used to transmit all video from the ISS to the ground, internal and external. It is also used by the crew member for their email, internet access, and phone calls to any number on Earth, and also to transmit all the scientific data to the ground from the system. Next, we have the ultra-high frequency, or the UHF. The UHF is mainly used for spacewalking astronauts. It provides two-way voice communication between them and the ISS. And with this system, they move the biomedical data from the astronaut suits to the ISS with this system, and then to the ground with the Sband system. So it is mainly used around the vicinity of the ISS. And you can see here one of the spacewalking astronauts with the UHF communication system. And for the US spacewalks, they use mainly the wireless external transceiver assembly, like the one you see in the picture. So it is a combination of VHF Link and Sband Link that provides real-time video back to the ISS from the helmets, the cameras mounted on the helmets of the astronauts. And again, these videos are transmitted to the ground via the Kuband system. And as I said before, sometimes the ISS has visiting vehicles. So they have a ship-to-ship communication system, and any visiting vehicle that approaches the station, once it is in range, they use the system. But what type of frequency that they use varies from one spacecraft to another, depending on the technology on the other spacecraft. So it could be UHF, it could be Sband, and so on. And to ensure a smooth docking experience, this type of operation is the joint responsibility of the mission control of the ISS and the control centers associated with the visiting vehicle. And next, we have the audio system that allows crew members to talk to each other across the modules. And it is mainly these audio terminal units, components that you see here behind the astronaut suit, and it is essentially a complicated intercom system that is just distributed all over the ISS for the needs of the crew. And the last communication system that we'll have a look at is the video, which by video I mean any external video and any internal video. So the external system consists, as you see here, from cameras that can be panned, tilted, zoomed, and a light that moves with the camera, and a controller to control the movement. And these cameras are operating continuously to provide the ground control with the videos of spacewalking astronauts, of views of visiting vehicles, and views outside of the space station. And in the internal system is mainly used for media outreach type events, like we see here one of the astronauts preparing for a public media outreach event in the Destiny module on the ISS. So now that we have looked at the main communication systems used for the main operations of the ISS, let's have a look at the amateur radio operations on the ISS. So first of all, what is amateur radio? Amateur radio is a hobby that enables participants to experiment with and learn about radio and to communicate with other radio amateurs around the world. And for our case, we need to communicate with radio amateurs on the ISS. So it is non-commercial, but every country must ensure that all the radio amateurs are operationally and technically competent. So there is an amateur code they need to abide
with, and every country has its own regulations. Internationally, amateur radio is monitored. Activities of amateur radio is monitored by the International Amateur Radio Union, and in the UAE by the Emirates Amateur Radio Society. But it is also governed by the TRA. So if you want to operate your own transceiver for radio amateur purposes, you need to be licensed. And to get licensed, you have to go through mandatory training and exams by the Emirates Amateur Radio Society. And on the ISS, or for the ISS, there's an organization called the ARISS, the Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, that is created and managed by international working group, including several countries. And some of their goals are to inspire interest in STEM subjects and careers among young people, to provide an educational opportunity for the public to learn about radio communication, and lastly, it provides crew with another means to directly interact with a larger community outside the ISS. So for these activities, the VHF link is used, and it is a direct radio transmission type of link. So it is not transmitted or relayed with the TDRS satellites that we talked about earlier. So some ISS crew members make random, unscheduled amateur radio contact with Earth radio amateurs, but these type of contacts depend on their work schedules. So they might do it during their breaks, free sleep time, and before and after meal time. And if you do have the right equipment to do this, it is important to know when the space station will be over your location and what frequency they transmit on. And even then, it is not guaranteed to get a contact because of the schedule, because you know how their schedules are packed with science experiments and ISS operations, so they might not have the time slot to do such contacts. But if you are able to get a contact, then the ISS uses several call signs. They have a Russian call sign, a US call sign, and a European call sign. And a call sign basically is a unique designation for your radio station that identifies the operator and which country he belongs to. And to get this call sign, of course, you need to be licensed. Whenever if you see videos of such contacts, you see the astronauts will begin the call with their call sign, and then the caller will also relay his call sign to the astronaut to know from which country he is. And without going into the technical details of the equipment that is being used, but they have several transceivers on the Columbus and service module in the ISS with their own antenna systems, purely for the amateur radio communication. And these systems allow for automatic and crew-tended operations. And we'll have a look later at what kind of automatic operations are being done with amateur radio. So to contact the ISS, a typical ground station would include a VHF transceiver and an antenna. And the antenna usually is a circularly polarized cross-Tyagi antenna capable of being pointed in both azimuth and elevation degrees, so like from north to west and above the horizon. And to get a good signal and to get a good contact with the ISS crew, you need to know where to point the antenna. And for that, there are several softwares available to track the ISS that tells you when the ISS will fly overhead and from which direction, so you know how to precisely point your antenna. But if you have an automated system like the one we have here with antennas, a rotator or rotator controller that is connected to a special software for tracking any satellite, in this case the ISS, it will make the job much easier, and you'll get the best signal that you can possibly can. So another type of amateur radio operation being done on the ISS is the SSTV operation, and this is a type of automatic operation that I talked about earlier. SSTV stands for slow scan television. It is basically images that are being transmitted from the ISS. They are JPEG still images with a 2-minute off time. Each image takes around 3 minutes to be transmitted. And all you need to do is to connect your audio output of your transceiver to your computer and tune into the frequency of 145.8 megahertz. And this is one image that I was able to decode from an audio I found online. So if you have the software, the free software MMSTV to decode the signal, you just play the audio and it automatically will start decoding the image. So these are some examples of images that have been transmitted before, usually to celebrate like certain dates in the space industry. And again, you can see here that the quality is not very good. This is because of the signal was not very good. So the clearer the signal is, the better the image you will get. And there's an online gallery called the SSTV gallery that you can look at these pictures, and even if you're able to track one of the ISS passes and get your own image, you can upload it on this gallery. And as we talked before about how hard it is to get a contact with an ISS crew because of their schedule, there's a program by the ARISS organization that you can schedule a contact with the ISS with. This is usually for schools and educational organizations. So they can contact the ISS either by direct contact. So if they have their own ground station, they can contact it with their ground station, or by what is called a telebridge contact. And that is when they use one of the ground stations provided by the ARISS organization, and they just connect to it by phone. So with this type of contact, like a school would be chosen, the students would have a chance to submit their questions, and on the day of the event, if their question is chosen, they can ask it directly to the ISS crew member on board. And, so their goal with this program is to involve students with amateur radio and to provide them the opportunity to learn about radio science. And these type of programs are great, that they provide an opportunity for the youth and to involve them and get them excited about space, about satellites and radio communication, and everything that is involved in it. So this is what I have for you today. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Tarifa, for this presentation and for exposing to us the different kind of communication that we use to communicate with the ISS from the ground station to the ISS, or within the ISS, how do the astronauts communicate with each other and so on, inside or also outside. So let me open the floor if you have any questions. I believe I saw, if you check your chat, Khalifa, there's a question here regarding how much does it cost to repair, upgrade annually? How much did it cost to upgrade the entire ISS?
So annually, they spend around $4 billion to do repairs and upgrade to the ISS. So yeah, and it also needs to be resupplied around 8 to 9 times a year with food, equipment, and all that kind of stuff.
Any more questions? Written or verbally?
There's one question: what problems does the ISS solve, and what is the use of it? So the ISS is basically a laboratory in space. You can do experiments in space that you can't do here. Usually microgravity type of experiments. There are many applications that have evolved on Earth from the ISS, and you can look at it online. Many spin-off products that have been produced. For example, water filtration system, medical applications like the robotic arm that is being used in surgeries. These type of things were developed first in the ISS. How much is the delay when we communicate with them? The ISS is not very far. It's 400 kilometers above Earth. So I'm not sure exactly, but I don't think it's
just a fraction of seconds, so it doesn't exceed 1 second. So
yes.
Just to add to what Tarifa says, so the ISS is like a science station. So you do all kinds of science and also engineering experiments. So whatever you would like to do, why do we need that? Well, because it is less gravity. So, and if you would like to see how plants grow in the less gravity environment, how to do your chemical experiment reactions, how to do your physics experiment, how to test maybe a new material, and also so it is the adequate location for all of this. It is expensive, yes, but I believe it is worth it. Okay, another question. Yes, Arifa.
There's a question: is there a reason of why experiment with ISS rather than zero-G planes, since they are technically experiencing no gravity? I'm not sure if they have a facility with zero-G plane on Earth that they can use.
Well, they have this this plane where you can experience during a couple of minutes this free fall when you get zero-G gravity. But this is only a couple of minutes. On the ISS, it is continuous. It is all day long, all week long, all year long. So it is a continuous, almost not zero-G. It is less gravity. There is nothing like zero-G. It is less gravity, so less gravity environment. That's why the ISS is much suitable for this long experiment. This plane where you have this free fall is just for a couple of minutes. Just you may say just for fun, not for science. Any more questions, please? Okay, so we thank Tarifa for this nice presentation. And as she said, this ARIS program, Amateur Radio International Space Station, and I believe the Academy is now preparing an application to request an ISS call. Hopefully our application will be accepted. We don't know when will it be because the application is a long one and it does request a lot of information. So we are filling it and hopefully it will be sent and hopefully we have the chance to communicate with the ISS. And for sure, we're going to associate different schools. We're going to use our planetarium to be able to accommodate as many students as possible, and hopefully it will be free COVID time. Hopefully. So maybe by maybe 2022. I don't know if Tarifa can say something about it. Is it by the end of this year or next year, Tarifa?
The application is due this week, but the window of the call is between January and June of next year.
Okay, great. So hopefully they will accept our our proposal to communicate with the ISS. Okay. Thank you very much all. So see you next month, inshallah. Next month, maybe after spring break. So wish you a happy spring break for those who are going to have a break. Okay. And also stay safe all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Assalamu
very much, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.